Hello and welcome back to my channel. For those of you that have been following along, subscribing, I just want to take a second to say thank you so much. I really appreciate the support and helping the channel to grow. You guys are amazing. For those of you who have not been following, hi, my name is Stefan. I'm a fantasy writer, low content book creator, graphic designer, and substitute teacher, so I do a little bit of everything. And with this series, we've been figuring out how to draw a fantasy map. So without further ado, stick around and make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to our world. So if you've been following along, we've been taking this map from a pure blank page and developing it into an actual map. And in this next part, we're going to take a break from geography and we're going to go into civilization. Yes, we are going to be figuring out our cities, our villages, our various locations that people congregate, and we're going to figure out how to actually put those things down. Now, you might be tempted. Here's a map. You might be tempted just to put little dots, random places, and then say this is a city or this is a town. And while that does work, I like to be a little bit more methodical about it, because when we look at why people build cities in general, there's a lot of reasoning behind them. So one of the first reasons that people will build a city at all is because, one, they've got a lot of people that they need to take care of. And so they're going to be looking at a place that they can do that. So what are the factors that go into that? Well, one's going to be food. Food is a very obvious one. So you're going to want to put your city or your town or your village in a place where food is accessible. That just makes sense. If you can't feed people, then you can't really stay there. Another thing to pay attention to is going to be water. You gotta be able to have fresh water. You gotta give people stuff to drink. If you're farming, you need fresh water for growing crops, so you need water. The other thing are going to be stuff like special resources. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the gold rush that happened in California and especially in Alaska, but people came and they basically made cities, they made communities, they made towns because of gold. They had, various stuff like the fresh water, but for the most part, they built a town around gold mining. And when the gold dried up, when there wasn't really any more to be pulled out in a economic way, then the people left the town. So those kind of towns, they came up for that resource. And then another classic resource is going to be like iron. People use iron in blacksmithing or just general metalsmithing. They do it, or they use iron for the creation of weaponry, for the creation of general tools. So iron is a good, solid resource. And sometimes you'll have a place where they'll build a mine, but it makes a lot of sense that you would actually have a little town around that for the sake of trade. So again, building a city around resources like gold or iron makes logical sense. You'll also have the issue of transportation. So a lot of transportation happened around the coastlines. That was just a logical way, because now you can take a boat, load it up, go along. You don't really have to worry about elevation changes. You just got to make sure that you can actually go across the water. So a lot of cities and a lot of towns came about on the ocean. So when you take all of that together, one very logical place to actually put one. So remember how we had planned out our a river right here. Well, I also knew that I was going to plan out a city right around here. So I'm going to put a dot right down there. And that's going to be my first major city. And the reason I'm going to put it here is, again, because it's going to be on the coastline. So you've got access to transportation, which is very, very helpful. It's also right on the river. So that's going to have access to fresh water. It's going to have access to a lot of other people. So we're going to add that guy right in there. And also, here's a river. Well, it might logically follow that another city will be right there, because what this city does down here is it gives essentially access to these mountains and to this lake through these rivers. And so if you were to take and maybe bring a boat up to here, then you can access it as far as fishing goes. And if you go over here, maybe you can access the minerals that are in there. And in the same way with this one, this has a river that goes all the way up to this mountain range. So maybe there's actually maybe a mining town. You know what? Maybe we've got a mining town just right here. I'm just going to put that right in there like that. So here we have right now 3 cities that make logical sense. So then we look at various elements of how many cities are there going to be. And really this comes down to the biggest question of how big your nation actually is. For the sake of this map, I'm just going to say that this is going to be one nation. So I'm not even going to worry about different territory lines here. I'm just going to count this as one major nation. And then I'm going to say, here I've got this area right over here, and it's next to all these islands. So there's probably some resources there. I'm going to put something right there also. But then going over here we've got a bunch of blank space. Well, what kind of city might actually work there? It's not by a big river, but here's one of the secrets. When I draw my maps, I only include the major features for the large areas. When I do a zoomed in portion of this, there's going to be a lot of little smaller rivers, a lot of little smaller things. So just because it doesn't show up on this big map doesn't mean that there's not a river in there. And when you go in and you do your smaller detail maps, then you can add in a little of a river. So I'm going to add one right down here, just like that. So here I've got a few little towns there like that. And also, because of the connection that it will have over to here, I'm going to put one down here at the point. And then, because I'm filling in this area, I think it would make sense to have one down here like that. Well, if you look at it now, here I have this one city all the way down here. I've got a city up here. I've got a city over here. And maybe these guys are connected by the waterway. But what if this guy wanted to be connected as well? Well, now we come into our question of roads. And roads are really important because, they connect things together. And if a place doesn't have roads, then it's going to be harder for people to get from one spot to another. It's not one of those things that you think about as necessarily being an issue, though. In the real world, roads exist, so we just assume that they're going to exist in a fantasy world in general. So maybe your road's not necessarily a paved road. Maybe it's more of a dirt road that at least can connect things. But whatever the case, Roads are definitely helpful, but they do need to be addressed if they're included. So for me, doing a road, I'm just going to use a dotted line on this one. And while it could be possible that I could follow the coast, maybe the land just isn't really good for doing a river or doing a road. So maybe this one actually cuts more inland. See, like this. And then when it gets to the base, then it's going to cut over like so, and then connect in there. Well, here now we have a really interesting point because it's at the base of a mountain, so it's by resources. So maybe we now have a town or city right there. And because we have it in this location, it's got access to up here, so you can maybe have little mountain communities in there, but it's now on a road system, and that's the other thing to pay attention to. Oftentimes, you're going to have various roads going through necessity, but then it's going to have a weird kind of crossing. So, like up here, for example, you're noticing that we have this particular one. Well, maybe this one actually has a road that'll go and kind of follow the river a little bit. And then it's going to cut over to connect with here. And then maybe also this one now is going to have a road that's going to go from here. It's going to want to connect in here, but it actually is going to come in to the river right here. And then, because it's actually on a waterway, maybe things developed such that a little city or town developed here. So now you've got a kind of mediary between these two. You got one city that can go down the river here to this city, and then this city can now extend to this city, and it can also extend to this city. So what happens? Well, here you have a city that is now connected to resources on many sides, connected to a few different cities, and because you're going to have people coming and going through there, it now becomes a hub. These hubs tend to have higher populations and might be like a capital city. It might be just a very, profitable city. So maybe this city right here developed to be a big city, and even going so far as to say that maybe that city is actually the capital of this whole area. So you see, based on just little things like we acknowledge that there's resources, we acknowledge that there's water, we acknowledge that there's connections, and then based on that, we go, oh, well, in a real world scenario, maybe this would actually develop itself out even further. Now, then we come on down to here. Well, we have a city that's going to be down here. We've got a city that's right in here. We've got all this little amount of water. So maybe there's also a city right here. So now this one's connected by the ocean routes, and these guys have a little bit of a trading community. Well, because we've got one here, it logically follows that we might have one on the tip here, like this, and because it's connected to the mainland, we might have one that's right here. Now, don't think that I've forgotten about this little guy here. I want this one to also be connected. So I've got a couple options. I can go down, I can go around the mountains, but I think it would make a little bit more sense if I came up here to the lake. Because then, when I come down to the lake, maybe there's actually a city right here. And this particular one has access to these guys here. We've got access to the lake now. So who knows what's in that lake? Could be, Could be a lot of fishing in there. There could be bigger fish than can actually be in the rivers. So now you've got all that. Because this lake is probably a freshwater one, then you can actually irrigate from it. So now you can get food access. And again, because it's connected to the lake, it's connected to the waterways, so you got a road going through there. And now, last but not least, we have these guys are kind of connected over to here. Well, what if someone said, you know what? I don't like that we're not more connected. And they decided that they're just going to build a city right here. This will still have access to the coast, so you've got access to these guys here, but they wanted something that would connect into that lake and then also connect to our capital city here. And then, of course, because you've got the road going to the lake, we'll put another city right there. And now you've got the lake access between the two of them. It's big enough, and they're on the same side. They should be able to share. And going from there. So, as we're noticing, we have a lot of stuff happening down here. We've got some stuff happening here. We don't have a lot going on up here. And here is one of the best parts about fantasy maps. You don't have to have everything covered. For all we know, these people just live down here and they're kind of exploring up here. So it's possible that there's not actually any city that's been built up here. And who knows why? You could have a area in the known, and then this could be like the wilderness. This could be the unknown. This could be the place where adventurers go but then don't return. This could be the place where you've got stories of these mythological beasts that have killed a lot of other people. Maybe there's smaller groups that have actually gone up here and they've just chosen to live their life on their own. They don't want to be part of society. There's a lot of stuff that can be done. And I think a lot of authors are afraid to have things that are unknown because it makes them as the author look like they don't know what they're talking about. But in reality, in the unknown, that's where stories happen. You know, it's like down here. Right down here, we don't know what's in there. We don't know what's in here. If you look up top here, that's some pretty deep stuff. Maybe there's untold mysteries that no one's discovered. And not only are, you know, some of your characters going to be discovering these through the course of the story, but maybe you yourself get to discover them through the course of the characters. They're exploring this area that is not actually, quote, civilized, is an example or a opportunity for you to just explore and have your own fun. So with this map, you don't actually need to have everything hashed out immediately. The other thing that's also important to remember when it comes to maps are these are maps, or these are things that are made by people. And if some people have not gone to certain places, they're not going to have the stuff recorded. So some of these maps might be maps that are made by certain explorers, and they're maps that are made by other explorers that cover all of this stuff. Or maybe there's an ancient map that actually has a lot of this detailed. You know, who knows? Maybe in the course of it, one of your characters discovers an old map, and now suddenly the reader gets a whole different picture because they're learning about the world in a way that they hadn't before. And that's okay. That is perfectly okay. So when it comes to civilization, when it comes to people, just keep in mind, why would someone settle in one location? 2, would said location actually be able to provide for a major city, a smaller city, a town, or a village? That's going to determine how many people actually are. And then with these particular cities, which ones do you want your characters to go to? So hopefully this was informative. Hopefully this made sense. And I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with on your own. Take care.